Good evening, class and Dr. Hill. Curtis Falkenstein here for the Week 4 video discussion post concerning women of the Revolutionary Era. For this assignment, I chose to focus on Mercy Otis Warren. She was someone who was completely unfamiliar to me before the beginning of this class. So I wanted to dive into the history and life of someone completely new to me. And what I found was very impressive, and what I found makes me believe that she is someone who should be known throughout America as a very important and influential player in the cause of American independence. Before I begin on Mercy Otis Warren, though, I'd like to discuss a few comments I had on Leah Malio's review of How Betsy Ross Became Famous by Laurel Thatcher Ulrich. I think Malio brings up a lot of really great points for us to consider as historians of the Revolution, especially considering the fame of the Betsy Ross story. She describes how the Betsy Ross story became publicized in 1870 by Ross's own grandson, William Canby, and its fame is the result of the time it was publicized. The nation was approaching its centennial and was reconciling after a very bloody and divisive civil war. So in comes the Betsy Ross story, and she describes Betsy Ross as a safe and non-controversial icon, but also begs the question of the validity of historical symbols. And she writes, historical symbols reflect the values of a country and highlight the needs and wants of the people. And so I thought that she had a lot of thought-provoking questions, particularly, do you think a woman of some other profession would have filled the shoes of a female revolutionary representative? How important was it to have a famous female from the American Revolution? And should we challenge the public perception of Betsy Ross? And I hope that this discussion post will address those three questions, because I do think that Mercy Otis Warren fills the role of a female revolutionary representative. And it's very important for her to be included in the national narrative and the national story of our revolution. And I do think that we should challenge the public perception of Betsy Ross, because she's essentially a myth born out of apocryphal sources and circumstances. So I think it behooves us as historians to promote the real lives and the real works of these people, such as Mercy Otis Warren. Mercy Otis Warren was born to James Otis on September 14, 1728 in Barnstable, Massachusetts. Her father lacked a formal education, but recognized his daughter's own intellect and actually arranged for her to sit in during the tutoring sessions of her brother as he prepared for the entry examinations for Harvard. And this is where she was introduced to the Enlightenment thinkers like John Locke and Isaac Newton. Otis Warren's pedigree in Massachusetts goes back to the very foundation of the colony itself. Her father's line descended from the 1630 Puritans that came over with John Winthrop to found Massachusetts Bay Colony, whereas her husband was a descendant from the Mayflower Pilgrims of Plymouth. It was due to this long heritage of Massachusetts Puritanism that Otis Warren felt she had a personal stake in perpetuating the Puritan project of Massachusetts Bay, and therefore became involved with the revolutionary movement. She had a written correspondence with Abigail Adams for over 50 years. She was a friend of John Adams and was praised by many of our famed revolutionaries as a great writer, a very prolific writer, and therefore I think she deserves a greater seat at the table of America's revolutionary generation. She ends up later in life publishing one of the great early histories of the American Revolutionary Era called The History of the Rise, Progress, and Termination of the American Revolution in 3 volumes totaling over 1,300 pages. This book was widely acclaimed. Thomas Jefferson himself bought it for members of his cabinet, and it's through her eyes that the early Republic Americans began to see how the revolution unfolded from someone who participated in it, as her husband was a revolutionary who supported her work, and her work was promoted by people like John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. Mercy Otis Warren was considered the greatest female intellect of her generation, and she worked within the confines of the time she lived in to contribute as much as she could to the revolutionary cause by writing letters and stories for the general public. She sought to spread the ideas of liberty throughout her readership to secure a Patriot victory. And it's my firm belief that Mercy Otis Warren's pen should be remembered above the needle of Betsy Ross. Thank you, and God bless.